This video is not a treatise on why Islam is false, but I do want sincere Muslims who are watching to consider what they've been taught were the reasons for why Islam spread so rapidly. This is important because many of us grow up thinking, well, if over 1 billion people believe in this religion, who am I to question it? So let's put the world's large Muslim population into perspective. Today, we see some of Islam's critics claiming that Islam spread by the sword. At the same time, most Muslims and Islamic apologists suggest instead that all wars fought by the expanding Islamic Empire were defensive in nature, and that Islam spread because it appealed to the hearts and minds of the conquered and liberated nations. Perusing history, we find a more nuanced narrative. Islam's spread cannot be attributed to the world at large being forced at the sharp edge of a sword one by one. That didn't happen. But we do know that Muslim armies had successively taken over more and more territory of the then known world for the simple sake of expansion. Yes, even in the time of the Khulafa Rashidin, as Sunni and Ahmadi Muslims would refer to the first 4 caliphs of Islam. The new state apparatus would then favor Islam over other religions. These other religions were, for the most part, allowed to coexist, sure, albeit under very specific provisions.
Now, whatever is the case about the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there is simply no denying that the Khulafa al-Rashidun and the Umayyads engaged in offensive conquest of other lands. The Sassanid Empire did not pose any immediate threat. They were not attacking the Muslims at all. In fact, as we will study, when the Muslims attacked the Sassanid Empire, Rustum said, "What are you guys doing here? Why are you attacking us? I mean, we're not bothering you. What are you doing over here?" Remember, that was the famous, we'll get to that conversation today and next time as well. And the Romans as well couldn't care less about the Arabs. Remember, we said this from the very beginning. Both the Romans and the Persians, or I should say the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire, that's the more precise term, they were minding their own business, fighting each other. And they were not fighting the Arabs at the time because they didn't see any strategic advantage in controlling the Arabs. The Arabs were not a civilization that offered anything to them, and they didn't care about oil back then, right? Unlike now. So there was no reason for them to invade. If they had wanted to invade, there could have been no stopping them before the coming of Islam. But there was no reason for them. Now that Islam has conquered and is solidified, there was still no immediate reason for them to invade. There's no threat at all. And yet Abu Bakr as-Siddiq sent armies of tens of thousands of people. And Umar ibn al-Khattab followed suit. And the same goes when Umar ibn al-Khattab sent Amr ibn al-As into Egypt. Egypt was not sending any army into Arabia. And Amr ibn al-As with 4,000 people said, "Give me 4,000 people, I will give you Alexandria," which was the capital of that region. I'll give you Alexandria. Why? What was Alexandria doing to the Muslims? Nothing. So the claim that, oh, all of this is a defensive battle, frankly, it's not proven by anything. And it goes against common sense. Why would you send tens of thousands of people when there's no threat at all? And the fact of the matter, therefore, there is simply no denying this. And the same goes, by the way, even for our lands of India, of Sindh, Makran. And they established the Umayyad.
The book In God's Path by Robert G. Hoyland relates how people in these conquered lands were not forced to convert. Like most people, they were pragmatic and didn't take too kindly to paying more taxes than other people in the land. You see, generally speaking, Muslims in these early conquests enjoyed paying fewer taxes than the non-Muslim subjects of these conquered lands. Here are some excerpts from Robert Hoyland's book, with location references given in the description box. Differential Taxation. The Arab conquerors would probably have wished that things stayed that way, themselves living a life of luxury at the expense of the conquered. Inevitably, however, many of the latter sought to get a share of the immense privileges enjoyed by the conquerors, in particular, release from taxes. Fiscal agents for Hajjaj complained again and again that the tax revenue has diminished, for the conquered people have become Muslims and gone off to the garrison cities. One group that we hear a lot about in the papyri of the late 7th and early 8th centuries are peasants who had fallen behind with their taxes and left their land in the hope of escaping their plight by conversion. Muslim revolts and the fall of the Umayyads. Though they may have been necessary, these reforms to the tax system stoked resentment against the Umayyads. Many different groups felt that they had lost out, in particular, local elites and recent converts to Islam. Recent and would-be converts to Islam, especially low-status individuals, often encountered hostility from the authorities and were frequently denied the exemption from poll tax that they had been promised when they converted. When Ushrus realized that a consequence of his policy was a sharp drop in tax revenues, he ordered, "Take the tax from whomever you used to take it from." And so they reimposed the poll tax on those who had become Muslim, prompting many to apostatize. Paying more taxes as non-Muslims made these people more inclined to convert, if only in name, to remove themselves from the burden of these higher taxes. As soon as Muhammad died, Abu Bakr took a year to fight the Ridda Wars, i.e., the wars of apostasy, as many had revolted and had left the fold of Islam. Here again, we see that the early Islamic Ummah wasn't about heartfelt religious belief. A large part of what was going on here was political. It had to do with alliances and taxation. If you were an Ahmadi Muslim and went to Sunday school, all of the Ijtimas and all of the Jalsa Salana conventions, ask yourself if you've ever heard of this disparate taxation levied on non-Muslims in these early conquests and how that incentivized the non-Muslim populations in those lands to convert. Then ask yourself, why is it that we haven't heard of these facts regarding early Islamic history? Consider how these nominal conversions to reduce the burden of taxation play out after just a couple of generations in nations with pro-Islamic state apparatus. Is it any wonder that a child raised Muslim, even by nominal Muslim parents, but receiving Islamic education from the state from a young age, will grow up emotionally imprinted with the beliefs attached to their now Muslim identity? Reflect on this first generation of nominal Muslims. Their children are being taught Islam at religious schools. This first generation of parents may have only identified as Muslims for the statutory benefits, including favorable tax relief. But soon, when you fast forward through a couple of generations, you now have a population of believers because of the entanglement of identity and lifelong societal indoctrination. It's no different than the simple observation that most people who are raised as Christians are more likely to follow Christianity. Most people who are born Hindu are not likely to be practicing Islam in their adulthood. Your ancestors. If today you are a born Muslim, might you have been influenced to be so because of your parents and their parents before them? Perhaps many generations back, someone in your family too was simply trying to avoid discriminatory taxation. Congratulations, you now carry the label and perhaps even the belief that your religion is true. Aristotle commented on the power of childhood indoctrination, on imprinting values, character, and belief on impressionable young minds. Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man. Ask yourselves, what percentage of Seventh-day Adventist Christians become Shia Muslims? What percentage of Salafi Muslims convert to Ahmadiyya Islam? The pattern is patently obvious, no? Most people do not choose their religion. It is nurtured into them from childhood. And so making a truly objective evaluation of a religion's truth claims for the religion one was born into is exceedingly unlikely. I recall once sitting in a gathering, it was prayer in fact, of Ahmadi Muslim adult males, and the topic of the then Khalifa's big preaching push had come up. Mirza Tahir Ahmed wanted each Ahmadi Muslim to bring in at least one new Ahmadi Muslim convert that year. The figure might have even been higher than that, but I don't recall. In any event, and more to the point, one Ahmadi Muslim in the group mentioned that he was covered this year, since he had just had a baby. He had created a new Ahmadi Muslim for the Jamaat. The implications of this man's innocent statement struck me, and they stuck with me. Implicitly, we all know that the greatest predictor of a child's future religion is the religion into which they've been raised. Yet, how many people truly evaluate the religious claims of their own inherited religion? Do you think reading literature from the Jalsa Salana bookstall is going to give you an objective and critical take on Islam? You're no different than the born Christian reaffirming their faith by reading Christian literature, debunking Islam and affirming the wisdom of Christianity. Perhaps your faith is strengthened by a charismatic Murabbi in the Jamaat.
And then when she came to Jalsa in 2016, and Huzur, now in between, she just wanted to make sure that this happens. So when she was told that Huzur said, I'll pray for you, and then she wrote a letter to Huzur saying, Huzur, give me a name, suggest a name for the boy.
Consider how your faith in Christianity would have been similarly strengthened by a no less charismatic and caring pastor had you grown up in the church.
To serve you, and I know you've gifted.
A related problem arises when religious people, and this of course includes Ahmadi Muslims, begin exploring comparative religion with a desired conclusion in mind. This is a dishonest method of inquiry. This is not the journey of truth seekers. It is a journey for confirmation bias seekers. These adherents want to gather confirming evidence for the conclusion that they already wish to reinforce. A conclusion that lets them maintain the happy status quo with the family and the community with whom they had grown up. This is an exercise in feeling good, not one of confronting and seeking out hard truths.